Hey everybody, thanks for watching. What I want to do today in this video is take a look at the gospel reading for this coming Sunday. It's from Luke chapter 10, verses 1 through 20. At least that's going to be the gospel reading in a whole lot of churches. And this particular section is unique to Luke. None of the other evangelists record it. It's the story of when Jesus sends out 70 or possibly 72 disciples to bear with them the message that the kingdom of God has come to those to whom Jesus sends them. And what I want to do is take a look at why Jesus chooses this particular number of disciples to send, because it's not a random number. It's not like Jesus was thinking, should I send 50 or 60 or 80 or 90 or 100? I think I'll just send 70. No, he chose this particular number on purpose, because when you look at the number 70 from the perspective of the Old Testament, it's going to shed light on exactly what is implicit in this ministry to which Jesus sends his disciples. So we're going to dive into Genesis and look at a few other passages in the Old Testament as well to do the same thing that I do in all of these videos, to try and shed light on the New Testament from the Old Testament, to give us a deeper and a richer understanding of exactly what is happening in the gospel accounts. So the first thing that we need to resolve is it 70 or 72? Well, I'm not going to resolve that. That's a long-standing debate with the New Testament scholarship. The Greek manuscripts of the New Testament are equally divided as to whether it's 70 or 72. I'm going to go with 70 because I think that it has this connectedness to the Old Testament that lends credence to that particular Greek reading of 70 disciples. Now in church, you might hear a translation that says 72. You might hear a translation that has 70. I'm sticking with 70 because of what I'm about to discuss here with its Old Testament connections. So, first of all, what's going on? Well, in this chapter, Jesus sends out 70 disciples, 2 by 2, into cities and villages to bear with them the message that the kingdom of God has come to them. They're to stay in the houses to which they're welcome, to eat what is placed before them, to preach, to heal the sick, to basically do the same kinds of things that they've seen modeled in the life and ministry of Jesus. But what I want to discuss especially is why Jesus chooses 70. Now, 70 is a fascinating number when you look at it from the perspective of the Old Testament, because there's a dual aspect to the number of 70, and this dual aspect and the way that it's interconnected is going to be crucial to understanding exactly what's happening in Luke chapter 10. So, first of all, 70 is the symbolic number of the nations of the world. And Genesis chapter 10 is a crucial text for understanding this. So Genesis chapter 10 is usually called the Table of Nations. It's this long genealogy that takes the 3 sons of Noah and it unpacks their descendants and where they lived, and sometimes it gives specific details about some of them. But if you look at the names, if you add up the names in Genesis chapter 10, those names total 70. So 70 is connected beginning in Genesis chapter 10, but throughout the rest of the Old Testament and into first century rabbinic thought, that number 70 is connected with the nations of the world. So when Jews thought about how many nations there were or how vast the world was, they did not approach this as we might approach it. They like adding up how many countries there are when we look on the globe. They always assume there were 70 nations or there were 70 countries. So when you hear 70, on the one hand, you're thinking of the cosmopolitan nature of the human population. There are 70 nations of the world. But there's something else interesting going on, because 70 is not only symbolic or the typological number connected with the nations of the world, it's also the symbolic number of Israel. If you look in Genesis chapter 46 at the description of those who are the descendants of Jacob who went down into Egypt, it says that they totaled 70 in number. And then if you look, for instance, in Numbers chapter 11 or in Exodus, you have 70 elders of Israel who are the representatives of the entire nation. So you've got dual typologies going on here. You have 70 that's connected with the nations of the world, but you also have 70 that's connected with Israel. And it's this dual typology and the way that it interacts with each other that provides us with the necessary understanding of exactly why Jesus chooses this number in Luke chapter 10. So what's going on here? Well, when Jesus sends out these disciples two by two, 70 in all, to all these cities and villages. What he's doing is this. He's taking these 70 Israelite messengers, who are the representatives of the new Israel, the messianic kingdom of God, and he's sending out these 70 that are this nucleus of a new Israel into all the world that is also comprised of 70 nations. So just like the 70 descendants of Jacob went down into Egypt and were eventually enslaved there, the story of the Exodus is the background of that, of course. So now Jesus is sending these 70 descendants of Jacob, if you will, these 70 who constitute the new Israel, out into the world. So just as the descendants of Jacob went down into Egypt, so now these 70 are going out into all of the cities and villages, which is really a prefigurement of the eventual mission of the church to go to the uttermost parts of the world. And what do they bear with them? Well, they bear with them the message that the kingdom of God has come to them. So the kingdom of God constituted in the Messiah is now going out into every single place into which Christ sends his messengers. And the messengers that he sends are bearing a very specific message, that God who chose Israel, that God who set Israel apart to be a kingdom of priests, to stand between Yahweh and the world. Now, this kingdom of priests that is reconstituted in the Messiah is bearing the message of that messianic fulfillment that the King has come. King Messiah is here, and he is establishing his kingdom. These messengers are bringing that forth to the nations. So the 70 connected with Israel and the 70 connected with the nations are both significant because they express this totality. God is sending out all of his people, all of those who are part of the new kingdom of God, into all the world so that the whole world might hear the promise that goes all the way back to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. Remember what God told Abraham, that all the nations of the earth will be blessed in him. So he is the unifying figure. God's promises of all of the blessings of life and of peace and of forgiveness and of righteousness that God gave to Abraham in his seed, that message is now going out into all the world. So first of all, that's the connection there with 70. And then one more thing. Why does he send them out two by two? Well, because this is another Old Testament background, because the Old Testament repeatedly says that every matter needs to be confirmed by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. So he sends them out two by two because this also is part of that Old Testament background. They don't go out one by one, but they go out 2 by 2 so this duality then can confirm the message which Christ has placed on their lips. So I hope that provides you with a little bit deeper and richer understanding of exactly what Jesus is up to in Luke chapter 10. This is really him who's bringing all the promises that God gave to Abraham to the fore, and he's sending out these 70 of the new Israel into the 70 of the world so that everywhere they go, they might proclaim the kingdom of the Messiah has come, and that message on their lips might be the means by which Christ himself is present in their midst to declare that he is the fulfillment that God gave to Israel. So thanks for listening, and I hope that this Sunday when you hear this message read and perhaps preached on, that you're going to have a better understanding of exactly what's going on in Luke chapter 10. And as always, thanks for watching, and God bless your day.